In today's class, we'll be looking at how to connect to a database using Java database connectivity known as JDBC. So we'll understand this with an visualization. So far, we were writing a Java program using Eclipse. So where our data was really saved? Our data was going to the RAM. So all our data was residing on the RAM. When we closed our application, the data on the RAM was lost. But there is a need for us to store the data permanently, and for that we have to store the data on the hard disk. We have to push the data to the hard disk. So our concern is we should not lose the data. So for that we'll be pushing the data to the hard disk, and here we need a software that can help us easily manage our data on the hard disk. So that software is a database management system software. So DBMS is a separate field in computer science. It's a very vast subject. If you want to fully understand about a relational database management system, then you can visit my lectures online. And I've created a separate playlist on CSE 2004 database management systems, wherein I have put in detailed lectures on what is a database management system and its advantages and everything on a DBMS. So we are going to use this software called Database Management System, which will help us in managing the data on our hard disk. So our objective is to make the data reside permanently on the hard disk, and to manage this data we'll be using this software called Database Management System. And there are many products. When you talk about relational databases, there are many products in the market. Some of the popular products are Oracle, MySQL, SQL Server. You have other products too, but these are some of the famous products we use. You can ask me a question, why we should use a database management system to store the data? Why can't we use files? In what way a database management system software is better than a file? So as I told you, this is a separate subject on its own, and I have created a lot of lectures on that. And this very first lecture, you have to refer to this video lecture, why DBMS and why not files. So here I have analyzed, I have compared what are the advantages of using a DBMS over files. Say in short, you use files only for a smaller set of data, wherein the number of users for that data is less and the updates made to the data is less, and there is no concurrent access to the data. So in such cases you go in for a file, whereas database management systems allows a lot of things like concurrent access to the data, security for the data, multiple levels of access on the data. So all these kinds of advantages exist, and I have charted all these things in detail in this video lecture. If you are interested in knowing the differences, you can visit this. So now our objective of using a database management system is to make our data permanent. No matter we close the application, we open it, our data should always be there for us. So first we need to understand what is this DBMS, and we are going to use this product MySQL for our demonstrations. So how to install this database? For that you go to this download link and download the corresponding version. So here I am using this framework called Xampp. Xampp comes with a lot of software put together like PHP, we have this Apache server, we have MySQL, we have Tomcat server. So it's a mixture of many things that is given to the user. It's mostly used for full stack application development. And I have installed Xampp, and I have MySQL to be part of Xampp installation, and the download link I am giving you is for the Xampp server. So if you download and install Xampp, you'll be getting a lot of things as part of it, and MySQL is also part of the Xampp installation. So once when you have installed Xampp, what you have to do next is you have to start Xampp, and you have to start these two things, the Apache server and then the MySQL database server. You need to start these two things. Let me show you how to start that. Say here I have installed Xampp and it's up and ready. Now I should start the server Apache, and this server will be running in port 81, and it will be listening to requests in port 81. and MySQL server, we should start that. So MySQL database is also started, and it will be listening in port 3306 for any requests. So these port numbers are available here. So that's how you start the servers after you install Xampp, and it very clearly says here that Xampp contains MySQL, FileZilla, Mercury, Tomcat, Apache. So it contains the mixture of many products, and MySQL is part of the installation. Why I have taken Xampp is the installation is pretty easy with respect to Xampp. And one important thing, when you're installing a MySQL database, you should ensure that there are no previous versions of MySQL running in your system. So if you have any previous versions or installations of MySQL, please delete that and install Xampp. So we should understand what is MySQL. It's a relational database management system. As I told you, I'm not going to take in-depth concepts about database management systems because that is not our objective here. Our objective is to connect to a database using Java programs. So we'll just have a brief look at what is a relational database management system. It is a system wherein the data is stored in tables, and these tables are related using keys. So when I say data is stored in tables, if I want to store the data of a student, I need to create a table. So table, you can visualize a table like this, and we have to mention what are the column names like student ID, name, address, phone, password. So this defines the structure of the table, and we have to create the table and then insert records into the table. These are the three different student records. Each record corresponds to a student. This is for student Sam, this is for student Ram, and this is for student Tom. And we put all the student objects inside the student table. So in a relational database management system, we store data inside tables. And we also relate tables using foreign keys. Let me just tell you what is a foreign key. Say we have a table for student records, we have a table for course records. A student registers for a course. So how will these two tables be related? We are going to use the concept of foreign keys. That is nothing but we bring the student ID and then we put that column in the course table. So by this kind of a relationship, we know that this student Sam has registered for this course. So this is a very brief introduction to foreign keys. Again, if you want to know about foreign keys, primary keys, all the constraints, you please visit my lectures on database management systems. So there I have elaborately explained all these things. But for those who are very new to database management systems and relational databases, this is the concept. We store data in tables, and we relate two tables by using a foreign key. Say we have a student table and course table. We need to follow which student is registering for which course. So we can just go with a simple relationship like this, wherein we take the student ID, put that in the course table. Now we know that this student has registered for this course. So we call student ID to be the foreign key because it is a foreigner. No, he has come from another table. So that is the concept of foreign keys. And we also use a unique identifier, that is a student ID itself should be unique for every student. A registration number is unique for every student, right? Likewise, a student ID is unique, and that is called a primary key. A primary key is helpful for uniquely identifying every record, whereas a foreign key maps or relates two tables together. Okay, that's about the theory. Now let's start working. We have installed our MySQL database and we have started our servers. Now what we have to do is we have to first create a table like this, right? A student table we can create, and then we need to populate some data into it. We can retrieve some data. So for that we'll be using SQL. What is SQL? Structured Query Language. Say whenever you talk to a database management system, you're going to speak SQL. SQL is the language that this particular relational database management system understands. So structured query language will be used for interactions with our database management system. Again, it's a language on its own. It has its own syntax. We have to understand structured query language. We'll be looking at some of the basic queries in SQL so that we can be immediately working with our MySQL database. So very first thing is we need to create a table. Let's go to our MySQL database here. So localhost and then port number 81. So this is actually the server interface or the GUI for Xampp server. You give localhost colon the port number, and then you can go and select Phpmyadmin. Phpmyadmin is nothing but a graphical user interface for your MySQL database. That's it. So you can just click on some buttons and work with your database. So now this is the interface to a database, and the very first thing is we need to create a database. So database holds a set of tables. So first we'll create a database. For that, what we are going to do is we are going to go and click on new, and then we are going to create a database. We'll call this database to be VIT. Say VIT database can hold many tables of faculty, student, courses, and other things. So let's first create. We'll give the database name as VIT. So you give the database name and then click on create. So this will create a database called VIT, and inside this database we should be creating our tables. So let's say now we are inside database VIT, and it's asking us to create a table. We can create a table. So what is a table? A table is something what we have seen. We can name this table as the student table. So let's go and say it's the student table. And number of columns, what do you mean by number of columns? Is how many columns you have in the table. So let's say we have 4 columns. Let's click on go. So this table is created inside the database VIT. And we'll specify all the columns here. What are the columns in a table? The first column is name. We'll say it's of type variable length characters of 20. The next column, what we add in our next column, we're just giving the columns here. We'll give the next column to be password, and it's also variable length character, length to be 20. The next column we'll have it as country, and then this is also character data type and length to be 20. And then we'll have a mark that's of integer. Mark should be of integer and length to be of 3. That's it. We mentioned the columns in a table. What we can do next is we can go and save this. So that's how you create a table in the database. Phpmyadmin is nothing but an interface that helps us work easily with the MySQL database, and this comes as part of our Xampp installation. So our student table is ready. We need to insert data into the table. Say when I browse, when I look into the student table, are there any records? There will be no records because we are not inserted any of the records. Say there are no records. So how to insert? We have to write some SQL queries. So SQL is nothing but structured query language. I'll be just teaching you some of the basic queries for inserting and selecting or retrieving records from a table. We'll see how to do that. First, let us insert. For inserting, we have to do write insert into table name is student and values is the syntax, and open parenthesis. Say if you're inserting text data, name is text. If I insert Satish, I just give it in quotes, close the quotes, comma. The next column we have to give is password. Let me say the password is welcome. And the next column is the country. Again it is text, so it's India. And then next column is mark. I'll give 45. Since it's an integer value, I'll not give any quotes here. Let me close it and a semicolon. So we have written a query to insert a record into our table student. Let's go and click on go. So this will insert a record into our MySQL database, that is the student table. Okay, so it has inserted, so we can go and check the record. When we go and click on browse, you'll be able to see this record. You see the record is there. Can we go and insert another record? See, we should know SQL because we'll be using SQL queries inside our Java program to instruct the database to perform a record insertion. So it's important we understand the syntax of the SQL query. So again, let us insert into the table name values and then say the next record. Say Ram is the next student and his password is abc123 and the country, let's say, is from US. He scored 76 marks, semicolon, and then you click on go. So now it should insert this record again to the student table. So that's how you insert records into the student table. Normally they don't maintain passwords in plain text, it will be hashed and stored, but since we are beginners, we'll start by understanding how to store data in plain text first. So we have inserted two records using SQL queries inside our MySQL database. So now the data is residing inside our database. It's on the hard disk. So we have inserted two records here. We can perform a lot of other SQL queries. Insertion is one thing. Can we retrieve records? That is the next thing. Say I want to determine who are these students. I want to know who are these students who are from India. So for that I have to use a select star from which table, student table, where we have to use the where condition, where country is the column name is equal to, in quotes I have to give India. It's just a simple statement which brings all the students who are from India from our table. So this query is selection query, that is select star from table name student where country is equal to India. So let's go and click go. Let's see whether we are getting the correct result here. So there is one student, Satish, who is from India. So that's how we can filter rows. So what we are doing here is, out of the two records, we have filtered one of the records. So we can also try some more SQL queries. For instance, bring me all these students, or fetch all these students who have scored greater than 45 marks. So whenever you're fetching data, it's always select. You give select star from which table, student, where mark is greater than 45. So when you are working with integer data, no need to give quotes, semicolon. So now let's run this. So there is one student. I think the second student has scored greater than 45. So that should be the record that is getting returned. When it says select star, all the columns in that record is getting returned. So let's see what the result is. Say there is one student Ram who has scored 76 marks, so his record is being written. So we can filter records, you can retrieve records by using select and conditions. Say if I want to view all the records in the table by just using a SQL query, how I can do that? If I want to view all the records, then just go with select star from the table name and then click on go. So it's just fetching all the records from the table, no filtering conditions here. So here it has fetched all the records from the table. Let's look at further SQL queries, like what if I want to update the password of Satish to something else. Instead of welcome, let's update the password of Satish to test. For update, we have to use the command update. So let's see how to write a SQL query to update a particular data there. So whenever you want to update any column, you use update. Which column we are going to update? Password column. No, it's wrong. Update table name, that is student. Set password, that is the column, is equal to what password we are going to set. It is the new password is test, where for which student we are going to set, where name is equal to Satish. So what it means is update the student table, set password to be test, where the student name is Satish. Let's run this. Let's check whether the password gets updated from welcome to test here. So we can update any record that has been inserted. So for update, we need to give a search criteria. Here the search criteria is name should be Satish. For the student, update the password as test. Okay, so it has updated the password. That's what it says. Let's go and browse and check whether the password got updated. Yeah, now you see for Satish the password got updated as test. See, there's one more thing. It's a big subject. Structured query language itself is a big subject. It may take a lot of time to learn. I'm just teaching you some of the basic queries so that we can immediately get started with our Java code and work with our database. Say if I want to fetch some of the columns, if I want to just print name and password, fetch only name and password from student table. So we are just filtering columns here. Then we give the column separated by a comma, select name comma password from student. So this is going to fetch name and password from the table for all the students. Okay, so we have Satish, test, Ram. So only name and password has been retrieved from the table. Okay, so we have learned some basic queries for insertion, selection and filtering rows and columns. Let's see how to delete a record. How to delete a record from the table. Say we don't like Satish, he's really boring us a lot, so let's go and delete Satish from the table. So for delete, the command is delete from student table, where name is equal to, the column is name is equal to Satish. So whenever you're giving a character data type, just give it in quotes. Now this record will be deleted. So it asks us for a confirmation whether you want to delete Satish. Yes, for sure we'll delete Satish. Let's see what is the output here. So let's browse and check whether Satish is still living inside the database. Okay, good. Satish got deleted. So that's how you delete. And say if you're not really happy with the table, we can go and drop a table. How to go and drop a table is click on operations. And you can come down, and it's given in red, delete the table. So it will delete the student table. Whatever table we have created, it will delete it. So the data also will be lost, the structure also will be lost, the schema will be lost. So let's delete the table. It asks us, are you sure you want to destroy? Yes. So we'll delete this table. It's not only deleting a table, you can also go and drop a database itself. So dropping a database is also possible. So it has deleted the table. Now we can also go and delete the database itself. So again, let me click on operations. Let me tell you how to drop the database. Database here is VIT, right? I can go and drop that. So drop the database in red. So this will drop this database VIT. So let's drop it. Okay, so far what we were doing was we were just directly uh, performing certain actions on the database by executing some SQL queries. You are directly interacting with the database. But our objective is we have to interact with the database using a Java program. From within the Java program, we have to write SQL queries and execute it. So that is our objective. So for what we were doing, we were using Phpmyadmin, which is nothing but a graphical user interface for MySQL database, and we were directly running our SQL queries on the database. We were directly interacting with the database, but our objective is to use Java code in Eclipse, and we should communicate with the MySQL database using Java code, and the SQL queries will be embedded within our code. So how we can make Java communicate with the database? For that we need some drivers, we need some libraries, and these drivers and libraries are available in a connector jar file, and we need to add this connector jar file. First of all, we need to download that and add it to our projects. So where is this jar file available? It is available in this link. You can download this, and after you download, you have to extract it to a folder. I've already extracted this, and this MySQL connector.jar file is the file that we'll be adding to our projects. So if you're going to create a project wherein it's going to communicate with the database, you go to this project, right click, and you go to Java build path and add an external library. That's it. So which library you're going to add? The MySQL connector.jar you're going to add. Here I have already added this, so you go to properties and then you go to Java build path, add external jars, you browse to the directory where you have this jar file, and then select that jar file. So you just select it, open. I've already selected it, apply and close. So this jar file should be there. If you go to reference libraries, I have my jar file in my project. So MySQL connector jar is added. So this is very important because when you're talking to a MySQL database by using a Java code, you should add the libraries and drivers that will help us to perform that, and for that we should have MySQL connector.jar added to your project. Very important step. Without this file, you will not be able to even establish a connection with the database. You will be getting a class not found exception. So that is the first step, and after this what we have to do is we have to see a demo on how to connect to a database or how to open a connection with the database. Let's dive into code. Let's start taking a look at the demo. Okay, now let's take a look at a demo of how to connect a Java program to a database. So this is a demo for connecting a Java program to a database, or in other words we can say we will see how to open a database connection. The very first step in engaging with the database is we have to open a connection with the database. So we'll see how to do that in this code. So first we have to import java.sql.star. So we should import all the SQL libraries for Java, and all our code will have that in a try catch block. So since we are connecting to a server, any exceptions can happen. The server may be down or our passwords may be wrong. Some kind of exceptions can happen. So we will catch all these exceptions. It comes under SQL exceptions, and we'll print a message e.getMessage. Okay, so we are handling all the exceptions here. Next, how to open a connection with the database from the program. For that, first we have to create an object of type connection con. So con is an object of type connection. We can initialize this to null. Next thing is we have to load the drivers that will enable us to connect to our database server. So how will we load that is we'll use class.forName, and then we'll mention the driver here. The driver is nothing but com.mysql.cj.jdbc.driver. So the driver helps us in establishing a connection with the database. We have to give dot new instance. So this is used for loading the driver. And the next step, we are going to define the connection, that is the connection object we have created, right? We are going to define it. We are going to pass three important things to our connection. Say when you're opening a connection, we should tell which database in our database we are going to connect. Say we have MySQL database. The very first thing inside that is we have to connect to a specific database. So if you go and take a look at MySQL Phpmyadmin, so here the database is VIT. We have to mention to which database we are connecting, what is the username and password for logging into our server. So these are the connection properties. We will mention that here, and we will perform that by using this class called driver manager dot get connection. So this will help us in establishing the connection, and we have to specify our URL here, that is JDBC MySQL, and then where the server is running. This is running in our laptop, so it's local host. So we are specifying where that server is running and which port number it's listening. It's 3306. So how we can know the port number is when you start Xampp, it clearly tells us on which port number our MySQL database is listening to. So we give that, and then to which database we are connecting. To which database we are connecting? We are connecting to the VIT database we have created. So let me give VIT. And then the next parameter is the username and password. The username is root, and I have not given any password, so it's null. So we specify the URL, the username and password, and we create a connection by calling driver manager.get connection. So this is our connection object. The next thing is we can give a message just to say that our connection is successful. So let me have a message here. A connection was established, or connection is successful, we can say. Okay. The very important thing is whenever you establish a connection with the database, after your work is done, you have to close the connection. So we have to do con.close, like what we did for files too. We used to open the file and then we used to close the file. So our code is done. And it will ask us to declare some throws declarations. We can add that. Okay, so we need to check whether we are able to connect to a database. Now let's execute this. Connection is successful. So we were able to successfully connect to our MySQL database. We were able to open a connection. Say if the database server is down, or if our user ID password is down, if we are not giving the right database to which we have to connect, or if you're giving the wrong port number, or you're specifying a wrong IP, or you're not giving where the server is running, if your URL is wrong, then everything will be handled by our SQL exception handler, and then we'll be getting the corresponding message. And if your driver information is wrong, then we'll be getting class not found exception. Or if you're not going to add the jar file we added to this project, right? The jar file we downloaded and we added. So in the reference libraries we'll have the connector.jar. If you're not going to have this connector.jar, then we are going to get a class not found exception arising here. So that's how you connect, or you open a connection with a database. This is the very first step with respect to Java database connectivity. You have to open a connection with a database. For that we need to pass the URL, the username and password. We have to load the appropriate drivers and establish the connection. I hope you are clear with this. In this demo we'll be looking at how to insert a record into the database by using a Java program. So here I have created this VIT database, and we have some student records in my student table. So we have two records. The first record is the record of Satish and his password is welcome, country India and mark 45. Likewise, we have the record of Ramesh. If I want to insert another record using a Java program, how will I be doing that? So we'll take a look at that now. So this is a demo for inserting a record into MySQL database. So whenever you want to engage or you want to perform some actions with a database, the very first thing is we need to open a database connection. Very important. So we know how to open a database connection. Let's start with the code. Whatever we are going to write will be inside try and catch, and we'll be having a SQL exception handler here. And any exception happens, we'll print that too. We'll not print the error code, we'll print e.get message, we'll print the detailed message. Okay, the very first thing is we need to establish this connection. For that, we'll create this connection object. We'll initialize that to null. Next, what we are going to do is load the drivers class dot for name, and then we'll give the drivers here com.mysql.cj.jdbc.driver and dot new instance. We have to close this quote and then we have to give dot new instance. So we are loading an instance of the driver. The next thing is we have to define our connection. What are the parameters? For that we have to use this driver manager dot get connection. This method will be calling. We'll be passing the URL here. The URL is JDBC colon MySQL and colon / localhost. The port number is 3306 and the database is VIT. We'll close it. Now the username is root and the password, say I have not given any password, so the username and password for logging into my database is just a root and it's a no password. So we have established a connection here. Maybe we can just give a message saying database connection is successful. Now we have established the connection and it will ask us to add some throws declaration, a part of exception handling. That's done. Now we need to insert a record into the database. For that, what we have to do is we need to create an object of type statement. So statement stmt is equal to, for that we'll use our connection, that is con dot create statement. So to insert data into our database, a record into our table, we'll be using an object of type statement. So we have to give statement object name is equal to the connection object dot create statement. Now we'll be using this statement object to its statement dot execute update. So to specify the query, we need to have this method. So this will execute the query on the database. So statement dot execute update, and we need to mention the SQL query here, that is insert into table name is student values. Here we are just writing the SQL query. That is why it's very important for us to know the SQL query. So it's insert into student values. What values is, first we'll insert the name to be Tom and then his password to be test, and say is from country UK, and say a scored 95 marks. Another very important thing is the values that you give here should match the columns in your table. First I give name, next password, next country, next mark, and then the data type should also match. So when it's a character, I give in quotes. When it is an integer, I give in, I don't give the quotes. And then we need to close this, we should give a semicolon, close this string, the SQL string we have to close the parenthesis and then a semicolon. So we are trying to insert this record into a database, and we'll be calling statement object dot execute update method to perform this action. So we'll give sysout record inserted successfully. So once when the record is inserted, we should close statement. So we'll do stmt.close, and we'll also close the connection. So this is very important. We have to close the statement and the connection. So this code will load the driver, establish a connection with the database, and then it will create a statement object and call this method to execute this query on the table, and then the database will have that new record. Now let us go and execute this code and see whether the new record gets inserted. Okay, it says database connection is successful and record inserted successfully. So what we'll do is we'll go to our Phpmyadmin. We'll just refresh this page to see whether that record is inserted here. So now we have two records. Let's wait for the page to get refreshed. Okay, so now you see the record got inserted. So this data, what we have supplied using a program, is now inserted in our database tom test uk95. That's the record we have passed. So that's how you use JDBC, the drivers, to connect to a database and insert a record into our table in a MySQL database in Java. I hope you are clear with this.